Hi everyone! I'm painting Captain Hook today. I'm doing another dot style like I did for my female villains. If you haven't seen them, you can see them on a guide of mine on Instagram. As you see, I've kind of already got them kind of sketched out. Part of my Patreon will be as a part of the $2 and up tier will include traceables for all of my Sunday live streams. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and start filling him in. I'm going to go ahead and start with my cadmium deep red hue. Now I'm going to fill in the background since you don't really see much of his coat the way I've cut this, because I kind of wanted to have like a rainbow of villains, just like I did for the ladies, I'm doing for the men. And I'm starting with Captain Hook because I kind of wanted to start in color sequential order. And I'm going to do this with a detail brush, just a round 4, something very tiny, just to kind of fill in the space. And this is gonna be a long stream, so don't feel like you have to hang in the whole time unless you are in fact painting along. But this is gonna be a long sitting because this is my dot style, so everything's got a lot of detail. So my Sunday streams will always be detailed pieces, and my Wednesday streams will always be kind of smaller pieces. I'm thinking that moving forward, I'll make Sunday part of my series. The next one after this will be Gaston for orange, Clayton for yellow, Magic Mirror for green, Hades for blue, Dr. Facilier for purple, and Oogie Boogie for pink. Just because I think that that would make a nice variety. If you're wondering why, for instance, I haven't done Scar or more of the famous animal ones, it is principally because I want to stick with more humanoid faces, just like I did for the ladies. For the ladies, I had done Cruella, the Evil Queen. Taka was sort of a stretch because I just could not think of a female villain that was orange, and she was sort of humanoid. And then the Queen of Hearts, Maleficent, Yzma, and then ultimately Ursula and Madame Mim. I just absolutely loved that female villain series. I'll have to repaint it. As happy as I am that they sold, I'm a little bummed that I don't have them on my collection anymore just because they were so cool. But based on the love of that is where I'm starting my male series. Does anyone have a favorite villain? My favorite villain has got to be, without a doubt, the Queen of Hearts. When I was painting her last time, I found that she kind of looked a lot like Fred Flintstone in the shape of her face. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. It was sort of unfortunate. And like I said, we're just going to be using this detail brush and kind of just coloring in that, blocking the space for where the colors belong. And then we'll go back in and add our variations of shade and color and detail to make it more interesting. Maleficent is an awesome villain. She is so cool. They did a couple of different like Twisted Tale book series, and they give her kind of more depth and meaning in those and than they do in the animated feature. Of course, the live action with Angelina Jolie is amazing. As you're working, don't forget to kind of go up the sides, just so you don't forget that detail when you're working on it later and adding the next layer of detail. This is an in-depth painting. It will probably have about 6 to 8 total layers, because you're going to have your base layer, your kind of dotted line layer. It will be more of like a bunch of series of straight strokes and variations of color to add the texture. And then there'll be several layers of that actually to create a lot of movement. And then after that is done, we'll be adding in several layers of dots. just to kind of finish him off. The goal is when you're done, you should have something that feels alive. If you were to run your fingers on it, only after it's dry, mind you, and you're sure that it's dry, you should be able to feel all the texture of the different layers of paint. The last time I did one about this size, it took me 4 to 6 hours, just because there is so much going on with it. We've talked about, favorite villains, but in general, what's your favorite Disney character? I really like Alice. She's just so curious and in like an adorable, fresh kind of way. In a way you can only really be when you're truly like 12 years old. Sometimes I wish it would be nice to kind of get back to that idea of just asking all the questions and then, challenging them. Why something is the way it is. Why does it have to be that way? Bella is very cool. The love of books is amazing, and all the adventures that she can go on just literally inside her mind. I finished up a sewing project today that I was pretty happy with. And I was super excited about it. It was a 1950s style crop top. And when I first, finished the base of it, I absolutely hated it. 100% hated it. It was like 3 inches too big. It fell off me. I felt horrible, like horrified. But, I went at the seams and I attacked it and I scaled it down and now it fits like amazing. Nothing is better than when you've got something that fits just like exactly right. It's a kind of pleasure you can only get from handmade clothes or tailored clothes, rephrase. Tailored clothes would give you the same effect, because then whatever you've purchased is designed to fit you instead of just random size whatever that some manufacturer decided was a size, which is a horrible thing all on its own. Like the garment industry is horrible, and most of the time the stuff that's made overseas is made with forced labor or child labor, and contributing to the third world conditions in some almost or second or third developed world countries. That I couldn't be quoted on, but I don't imagine that life is great in these places, especially for the folks that are working these jobs. But that's a whole other thing altogether. We're almost kind of done putting in the red, and then we'll start going in and adding in our other colors. And again, don't be too worried about directionality or anything with this. This is literally, we're doing it just like a coloring book. We're just blocking in the color, just like you're coloring. Except for we're doing this with paint. That's the only difference. I'm kicking myself. I should have grabbed a cup of coffee. Maybe I can convince the husband to grab one for me. Or a soda or something. It never occurred to me that my mouth would get dry talking so long in a row. There we go. Okay, and now for the coat. the underside for this I'll worry about doing at the end. I don't want to mess everyone's orientation up. Okay, I'm going to rinse off. And the next color in, we're going to add a little bit of dioxazine purple to our existing cadmium DPU red. And we're going to make that weird sort of fuchsia that is his hat. We may need to add a little white, but we'll see how the shading comes out. Actually, I think it worked out perfect. I did about 1 parts purple to 1 parts red. And I'm using the angle brush for this just because I'm trying to push a little more paint. There we go. If you're using an angle brush, you'll notice that if you change the direction, you wind up picking up your paint and leaving a weird line. For that, you don't want. So you'll kind of want to start at your edge and kind of work your way up when you get to a point where you're not working at the top or the center anymore. You're getting into your details. If you're noticing any white dots while you're painting, it means that you need to add a little water to your brush. Thank you. I hope it looks good. These kind of paintings tend to stay in the hot mess stage for quite a while. You won't feel like you're making a lot of progress at first. Again, I'm fixing my directionality for this just because for here with this kind of coloring, purple has a tendency to be a little opaque. So your brush strokes will show in a more pronounced way. And again, don't forget your top as you're working on your hat. You want to make sure that it is covered up. And it's okay if you kind of overlap an area or mess up your lines, because you can always dry it off and, course correct. This is one of my favorite things about using the angle brush for is when I'm working on a curved angle, I can pick up the paint and kind of drag it around and it keeps it kind of clean. And this part's going to be a little bit finicky for the directionality. But if you think about the way a hat is made, you'll kind of want to work from, think of the face as like a radiating line, and you want your brush strokes to kind of go in that, like they're coming off of him. All right, we're just going to keep working at filling it in. Did anyone do anything exciting this weekend? Any big plans? I hurt my back earlier today. I've lived in my house for about almost a year and a half now, and I'm finally getting around to like digging up where there's a whole bunch of like rocks in the front area, like where you walk up to your house, because they never bothered to put like a proper walkway in, mostly because there's not even a proper driveway, but that's neither here nor there. I was digging out all of the rocks and kind of forming a new French drain for the house. A French drain is a way of alleviating water that comes off the side of your house, like if you don't have gutters. so that way it doesn't fall straight down onto the ground and spattering dirt everywhere. So I was basically fixing our French drain today. Oh, you took down Christmas. I'm sorry. I know how sad that probably made you. Mommy was working on taking down Christmas all week this week, and she was working on it a little bit yesterday. I imagine that was very sad. Okay, so we've got the purple part of his hat in. We're going to go ahead and rinse off. And we're going to put his hair in next. I'm sorry, I missed a part. I missed the upper half. Silly me. I wondered why it didn't look quite right. There's more to his hat. We'll keep going up. This part you can be a little bit looser about because this is where your feather is going to go. And you'll have to kind of go over top of this area for your feathers to have like a nice proper stroke. For this one, because it's the top of the hat, we kind of want the brush strokes to go this way. So we'll do that real quick. You just kind of want it to make sure that it's noticeably a different direction than this other part here. So it's easier to tell that it's... Oh, yep. Don't forget the side, although this side, the feather is going to be taking up the whole of it, except for right here. And again, the same sidewards direction. Thank you for pointing that out. My sister-in-law has done a number of paintings with me by this point. And one of the things I feel like I harp on about a lot is don't forget your sides. The left side, oh, yep. I wasn't going to go over there just yet, just because I didn't want to stick my hand across the front. I have a tendency to wear my paint a lot, especially if I'm restricted to how I can move around the canvas. The camera is directly over my left shoulder, so that makes this just a tiny bit harder to work on this side of the canvas. Okay, so we've got that part in. Now I can rinse my brush. I've got my left, my top, and my right. Now I'll go ahead and stick his black hair in. For here, direction will matter. Your hair has a natural texture to it, and your brush strokes will kind of indicate that even in just the bottom layer. I'm using Mars Black. I like this in particular instead of any other shade of black because it looks more like natural hair. And Captain Hook's hair is kind of curly. So when I'm putting in my strokes, I'm going to be thinking about that as I'm going. The fact that he's got kind of a coiffed hairstyle. He's got that strip of black that shows up here along the side. So we'll add that in first so I don't forget it. And then a little bit of where his jaw is, we're coming up around the back. There we go. If at any point you feel more comfortable going with the detail brush, that's totally okay too. I'm just filling more space, and when you're putting paint on your brush, you should never load it past where it dips into the metal, because it means you need to be using a larger brush than what you're using. I'm going to go ahead and do the left side of my canvas first, just so I don't forget it again. I'm intentionally dry brushing most of this, kind of drying off my brush a little bit before I put more paint on, because I really want like the texture and the buildup of paint. And especially when I'm working with black, just because I want it to be like real black. It's probably not super noticeable, but when I'm doing this, it's creating strokes that under the, under the right light, you'd see more of that kind of round shape that I'm doing my brush strokes in. And again, I'm going to save the bottom for last. I normally wouldn't do that, and at home I would encourage you to go ahead and fill it in as you're going. But I don't really want to reseat my canvas and then worry about it not going back the exact same way again and mess it up the view for you guys. All right, I'm going to go ahead and go up against here, get that nice clean line in. There we go. I know I mentioned which villains I'd be doing next in this series. Which ones are you most excited to see the next for? Oh, cool, Pikachu. You want me to do Pikachu next? I did do a Mew for my husband's birthday last week, and he was so happy with it. Maybe I'll do the Surfing Pikachu from the Celebrations pack. Maybe that could be cool. Okay, so I've got this side done, and I'm just kind of continue to add a little bit of texture with the brush stroke, just kind of move the paint around a little bit. And I'm going to do the other side now, because he's got hair on that side too. And this one I want to be kind of careful, because I don't want, because the yellows and whatnot for acrylic paint are kind of opaque, so you don't ever really want to have to try and paint over a color with yellow. It has a tendency to require you to paint it white again, like an area white, before you add yellow back for, good clarity. And I don't want to have to do that. But if it does happen to you, that's totally okay. You would just want to dry your canvas and then add the white, and then dry it again when you're ready to add your yellow. All of the warm colors tend to have this problem. Reds, oranges, yellows, they are all guilty of this. You never want to have to try and paint over another color with those. And again, here in the center, I'm still doing kind of maintaining that texture. He's got curly, bushy hair. We want that to come across. And if it comes out like your shape is a little lumpy, more's the better. He's got kind of that hair. All right, this is gonna be a weird angle to do this at, but I'm gonna, follow the straight line and then curve around the bottom. There. All right, so I've got my hair in. Oh, I just realized I missed a piece to the hat earlier. Use my tiny detail brush and put that in. I don't know how I missed that. I'm just not with it with this hat today. But it happens to everyone. There. Okay. Oh, just occurred to me, there's red here for his shoulder too. Let me go ahead and add that in. Again, that was the cadmium deep red hue. I mixed what I had down there, so I just put a little bit in there. I'm just trying to make sure that all of my other areas are done before I start working on the skin. And because part of the background meets up with where the sleeve is, I'm going to use some of that color I mixed for the hat just to kind of differentiate it right here at the beginning and then blend it out into this red. Just so that there's a little bit of a break in the color. And again, I'm going to work my way around the side. He's starting to look a little like Captain Hook now. There we go. Okay. Right, now I'm going to put in the base for my little lilac feather. Oh, thank you. I'm going to use, I could have mixed the Diox purple with white, but since I already have a light violet here, I'm going to go ahead and use that. I want to say the stockings, because I think he wears stockings, is almost the same color as this. But I'd have to go to the internet to verify that. I'm using the detail brush here just because I don't want to overstep with my feather because there's going to be a lot of texture. I'm going to go back with my fan brush to add some of that in. So I'm just kind of making sure my lines are really clean, and then I'm going to go over it. And you're going to want to, aim your strokes out up to the top, just like the way a feather is. His big giant feathers, one of my favorite things about his outfit. I'm crazy for the feathers. I absolutely loved when I did my sewing projects last year for villains, and I had done Dr. Facilier's hat, and adding like the feather on the top for that was just like gold for me. The same with Governor Ratcliffe's hat, the turquoise feather, gold. I absolutely love, this idea of like the feathers being kind of a marker for what belongs in a villain's hat or headgear in general. Because I think Yzma does feathers too. And that's just dope for me. I just love it. There. Okay, so next what I'm going to do is add in the yellow and the gold for the hook. I'm going to start with yellow ochre. It's kind of a muddy yellow because, his hook isn't actually yellow. It's more of a gold. And we'll go over it later with some iridescent for that. But for now, we're going to use the detail brush and do the gold, or the yellow ochre, for the idea of gold. And you'll want to go over your guidelines. I do my guidelines with watercolor pencil. If I was doing a thing where I had already had the background all painted in, I would have used chalk pencil just because it also wipes away. With watercolor, you use water to pick it back up. I mean, it smears it a little bit, but it lifts the color back up. I'm kind of correcting my line a little bit because when I sketched it in, I was kind of in a hurry. There we go. You'll definitely want to, watch where your hand is. You don't want to dip your hand accidentally in your paint or slide your hand across a wet canvas. I've already done it a couple of times, so I know I'm going to have to touch up the white on his collar from where it happened with the red. I'm sure there's a tool out there that keeps you from resting on it, but I'm not likely to ever use something like that. I just wear the paint and make the correction. There we go. Oh, I didn't finish saying, I had dug up my rock garden. Well, not rock garden, but I dug up the rock bed that's up there and got that all fixed up. What kills me is the last person who had this house went through the effort of putting in all of these rocks, but didn't use enough of them to make sure that it did what they wanted it to do. So even though I fixed the problem, I know I'm going to have to wind up putting a lot more rocks down so that it actually does what I need it to do, which is, keep the water runoff from splashing dirt on my front porch. Because I'm getting ready to put my garden down, at least my front flower beds. Yeah, I'm excited. It's finally happening. There we go. And okay, so our yellow ochre is done. We've got that all filled in. We're gonna rinse off. And I'm gonna touch up my white before I go to the face. Just to correcting where my watercolor brush got a little, where I was sketching and made a few errors and I needed to clean up my line. It helps smooth out the lines I've already painted. There we go. And we'll do that over here too, where his neckerchief is. Just covering up where I made any mistakes in my drawing. We'll wind up doing some more here, but don't worry about filling it in white. It's clearly already mostly white, just from the canvas. Let me move my water cut so I don't have to keep reaching across. Okay. Now for the face color. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mix a little bit of burnt sienna and white. I'm not going to use a lot of burnt sienna. I just want to get to a nice kind of taupey color. We're not aiming for exact pigmentation here. That's not my goal. We're just trying to get it flesh colored because he is not pasty white. And I'm going to use my angle brush to mix it on my palette. And I'm kind of dipping off the excess of the water off my brush. Okay. I need to add a little more white to my mix. It's a little too dark still. If you had buff titanium, you'd be able to use that straight out of the tube. I did not have any of that on hand, so I am making do with what I have. There. All right, we've got something that kind of approaches apricot. I'll go ahead and put that up on there. We're trying to be as purposeful about our brush strokes as possible here because you don't want it to be super streaky because you're not going to do a lot of excessive dot work across his face. The face is usually the one area where I kind of leave it mostly alone. Mostly. Not entirely. There we go. No, I picked up too much paint on my brush. So I'm going to rinse off and dry my brush a little bit. There we go. And I'm using the angles line to help get that smooth crevice in. And again, brushing out, the excessive strokes. There. Excellent. And if you're ever, not happy with something that you're working on, you can, like I said, just let it dry. Don't overthink it. You don't gotta keep working at it and working at it. You'll find that you'll, make more that you have to correct the more you play with it while it's wet if you make a whoopsie. And whoopsies happen to us all. Now I'm going to use the detail brush when I go around the hook, just because I don't have the amount of control I want to have on this size of an angle brush there. Oop, and I picked up a little bit of my black paint, so I'm going to rinse off my brush and kind of drag it down. And I'll endeavor to kind of cover that up a little bit later, or maybe in another layer when it dries. Just like I said, sometimes it happens. Sometimes you stroke and you pick up more color than you meant. Happens to the best of us. And I am hardly the best of us. I am still a novice. I still count myself as a novice. I don't think art is ever something that you master. It's something that you're always working at, always working towards. Sort of like how lawyers always practice law. Well, artists always practice their craft. They'll never be able to say that they've truly mastered something. You can always be better. There's always something you can work on. For me, that is clouds. I feel like I'm perpetually on the hunt to master clouds, and I'm just nowhere near there yet. But I've come a long way from my original method on doing clouds. Okay, and again, we're just filling it in. Anyone got any plans for next week? What is next weekend? And we know what the date is for Saturday. I don't have my calendar in front of me. I signed up to be in the Sci-Fi Miss Bartow, so I have to memorize something as a talent. I figure I'll do like a momming. Well, yeah, that is definitely a full-time job. That is definitely a full-time job. But I'm sure you wouldn't have it any other way. Does your munchkin have any cool things coming up? I know she's in cookie season. I'll be doing a thing for placing a box of Thin Mints on order. There we go. All right, so the base is done. We've got our base color in. So now we're going to attack it with a hairdryer. All cookies all the time. Oh yes, I'm actually feeling all the extra cookies that I ate at Mommy's. Dave, those cookies were great. I think I ate 3 dozen. All right, so you see I had a little bit of water there and it picked up some of my paint and it moved it around. So I'm going to fix that real quick before I dry anymore. Water, when you're working on something, can in fact pull the underpaint up of your painting. Right, now's a good time to kind of inspect and see if there was anywhere where you missed any white little dots when you were filling in your canvas. So I'm just going to do a quick little touch up in a handful of areas. Now it is safe for me to rest my hand on it. It's also a good time to like clean up any lines that you've got where you painted over something. There, that looks pretty good. I put on one of my dresses that I had made a few years ago the other day and was horrified to realize that it would not go over my boobs anymore. So it's a good thing I'm starting to train for the OUC half marathon next weekend. Well, the race is in December. I'm starting to do the training next weekend because I've got to lose a little around the middle. Not a lot, just a little around the middle. Did anyone make any New Year's resolutions? Speaking of weight loss, I did not make any standard resolutions. I'm now adding sort of like just a little bit of a texture layer here. It's the same color, but I'm just doing like lazy strokes on it. Dioxazine purple is sort of a thin layer paint, as is the red that it was mixed with. So by adding just a handful of strokes, when it dries, the areas where the strokes are will be just a touch darker than the rest, adding that little bit of dimension. It's the hint of a background. I'm not filling it in like a whole second layer. I'm just kind of doing some lazy strokes across the canvas in the areas. And I'm sort of setting the intention for like the way that the angle of my dots and lines is going to have to go. correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they call this where you're leaving like thick layers of wet paint to dry for a raised texture in pasto, but I did not get my degree in art. Like I said, novice. I got my degree in history, but I did remember some of the art terminology I had to learn because I did take an art history class. There we go. All right, so we've got our basin, and we're starting to put in our sort of texture. And because this layer of the hat was the kind of paint it was, adding just another, lines in the existing layer was enough. But for the other ones, we're going to be going over it in either a slightly lighter or slightly darker shades of what is already there. So for the hair, if you have any black still left on there, you're going to mix in a separate spot. Use kind of a brush to kind of scoop it up into a different spot of your paint well, because you don't need a whole lot of it. And just a fraction of white. Or if you've actually got some of the face color left over, you can mix some of that into your black. That would be sufficient too. Just to lighten it up fractionally. Not a lot, just a fraction. You're kind of making a deep gray. Something that is just noticeably lighter than what is already there. All right, so this is where it gets twisted and fun. I'm going to take my little detail brush, and I'm going to kind of create the hint of the curl. And I'm going to start deciding kind of where my curls are going to be. Nothing too crazy, just kind of a little bit of a circle. Little circles going in different places. We're just hinting at the idea of it. And I'm just doing the outline of the curl right now. I'll tell you, I wish I had his hair. I've been looking into shampoo bars and conditioner bars that are good for like light hair. Right now I'm going to kind of fill in where I've got the insides of my circles, just kind of all in the same direction of the circle. We're just creating movement with the line. The disconnected lines kind of done in their own direction will create this idea of texture and movement without you having to connect all the lines. And even if you can't really see, it's very like, I'm sure it doesn't look very noticeable on the screen right now because the color texture is so very light. But we're going to go again and again with lighter colors over the same spot until we've kind of created this full body texture. Now I'm going to go over and do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so I've got my first layer of hair texture in. Now I'm going to add a little more of that white or that facial color into my pot to make my gray just a little lighter, just fractionally lighter. We're going to follow the same pattern that we did before. We're going to go around our circles. Doesn't have to be in between. It can go be over top. You're just kind of wanting to leave some of the existing layer and then add some more. It's all going to work together to create this idea that there's texture. And again, all up here needs done too. And I might even go ahead and add just a tiny bit for that little strip that's beside his face. Just enough so that it looks like it still belongs. And then over here as well, again, you know, taking care to follow the same course I did before. Aw, thank you. I do love me my Disney villains. They are so fun. And I bet you can bet what's going to happen next. I'm going to add yet another layer of lighter gray. I told you it's going to be a hot minute. This is one of those ones that takes a while. So I'm going to add a little more of the lighter color again into my existing gray. And by now it'd be kind of a more traditional gray at this point. Or if you've used, like I have, you use leftover of like your skin color, it may look a little more like a smoky gray. And that's good too. And we're just going to continue to add little lines kind of in the same direction that all the previous layers went in. And I'm going to add a couple up here along the face. And again, you don't need to overthink it or overcomplicate it. You want to be able to see your previous layers and all the new ones. And of course, you know, keep up with your sides as you're going. I'm going to be doing the bottom separate at the end, just because I don't want to mess up the view for you guys watching. It'd be a little harder to figure out how to get this back into frame again if I moved it. That's right, I almost dropped my paintbrush. It happens. I usually wind up wearing it when that happens. That's why it's usually a good idea to either wear, you know, an old shirt or an old long sleeve shirt backwards to, you know, kind of use as a smock. I'm sure we all did that in grade school at some point. And now I'm going to do the other side. All right, I'm going to let that dry, and then I'll go back in and add a little bit more. Yes, a little more still has to be done, but I'm going to let that bit go for now. Okay, now let's go ahead and tackle this hook. It needs another layer of yellow ochre. It's a little too translucent, and we need it to be nice and deep shade. There we go. I saw that Joann's has a pattern sale again. Simplicity patterns are $1.99. There's a ton of Gertie patterns. I absolutely love the Gertie patterns. It's sort of a modern take on vintage fashion. The Bolero and Sarong set that I'm currently working on is one of hers, and it just fits like a dream. But it was definitely not right out of the envelope. I had to make some adjustments. But that's okay. Not everyone is the same shape we expected. Okay, so we've got our second kind of layer, cover layer for the hook in. So we're going to go ahead and tackle these red areas now. So I started off with a cadmium deep red hue, and I'm going to go over it with like a Naphthalene Crimson, just because I want something that's a little lighter. Actually, no, before I do that, I think I'm going to do another layer of the red. I kind of want it to be a little deeper, a little richer. So we're going to do another layer of red. I want more full coverage, so it is truly like in your face red. Oh, there it is. There we go. And again, paying attention to the sides, making sure you get good coverage there. There we go. And the top. You don't want to neglect the top. There we go. This will be available to view afterwards. And I'm also going to post it to YouTube. And I might do a sped up version as well on Instagram. We'll see. I have to find a good video editor for that. And I can't do that other area with the angle brush, so I'm going to go in with my detail brush for that. If you're a member of Patreon, you'll be able to help me choose the theme overall for next month. This month I am, in fact, focusing on villains. Not that I won't do, I may not do stream all of the villains that I work on for my series, but, you know, for this month, my Sunday streams will continue to be villains. But if you're a member of Patreon, you'll be able to tell me what you want me to paint, what you want to see me paint. You'll be able to do that in a poll. And that's available at the $2 range and up. There we go. Okay, so we got the nice deep rich red now. I'm much happier with it. Now we're going to start attacking the feather. So I'm going to grab my fan brush. I'm going to use a little one because I want a lot of control. And I'm just going to dip the very ends, just the ends, just barely in it, just barely on there. And I'm going to, I need to move the water out of the way. Just kind of brush the ends to create that kind of feather-like texture at the ends of my feather. This idea that it has its own, you know, unique texture, that it's fluffy, that it's got fraying ends. And again, I'm just barely loading the brush and kind of dragging from the end. Just kind of creating that illusion. And it's not a whole lot, just a little. We're going to do this all the way around. And then on the other side, we won't be doing it here because, you know, the feather is sticking down in the brim of his hat, so you wouldn't actually see that part. So not at the bottom, just at the sides and the top. And now I'm actually going to add just a little more, and I'm going to kind of just brush it, dab it on overall for the feather because we want the texture of it. We don't want to see an extensive amount of brush strokes. All right, and as we know, feathers have spines. So I'm going to take some of my dioxazine purple and mix it into a separate well and add some of the lighter purple into it to kind of give it a more medium shade. Just something that's a little darker than what we already have. With my detail brush, I'm kind of going to go up. And just going to do the suggestion of them there. Nothing too intense, just the suggestion. And a couple, oh, that was a little darker than I meant. Kind of off the shoots. You don't want it to be you don't want it to be overbearing. We're just kind of creating the idea of it now. That it would be darker in the center. Oh, and you see I made a whoopsie. So I'm going to rinse off and dry that spot. And since I still have some of that color on my palette, I'm just going to brush it in real quick. There, no harm done. Okay, so we've got the first kind of suggestion layer in there. Now I'm going to take it just a little bit deeper. And create a few little offshoots. Add a little bit of, just a tiny bit of water to my brush for this. Don't forget for it to go all the way up and off the side of your canvas. All right, now I'm going to take my little detail brush and I'm going to go back with the light purple and do just a couple of straight lines kind of in the same directionality as all of that over my layers. In the same direction, just so it continues to have that feeling of the feather coming up. And I'm going to take straight dioxazine and go down the center. In little dashes. And then on my little spines there. I don't think I'm going to do the dot tool for this one. I think, like Cruella, that this one might be best if I do it in motion lines instead. But we'll see. I may change my mind, or I may decide to do dots in a couple of places, but not all of them. Captain Hook is one of the few bounds that I haven't done that I'm really excited to do. I had one planned for December, but I just didn't make it to it. All right, now I'm going to mix a little bit of that violet and dioxazine again, and I want it to be a little on the darker side. Think kind of like Ursula purple. I know you ladies know what that means. And I'm going to continue to kind of add some directional lines, all going up. Okay, and I think for the moment, this area is done. See, I'm still not happy with this coverage of the yellow, so I'm going to do another quick layer of the yellow. There we go. Much happier. I'm going to put out a little bit more for the base. I don't have quite enough on my palette. It's always a good idea to start off with as little as you think you might need and only add a little at a time, so that way you don't wind up wasting paint. There we go. I think I'm finally happy with the coverage on that. I think on the next go, we'll go ahead and add the metallic. All right, so now we got to do something about this white area. We don't want straight white. So we're going to take white and add it to that gray that we made for the hair, that lightest shade. We're going to add a little more to it. We're going to really, really dove it out. And I'm going to smother it on here. I'm going to go back over it with white, but we needed to have something to work with. And again, if you're at home, you know, you should, at this point, you should do the underside of your canvas. I'm going to fill it in, and then I'm going to do my directional strokes. I'm going to lift this up a little bit because I can't really get to the area I need to get to. This is an easel I bought at Michael's. It was $20. This is the one I use for my classes. It is definitely a great easel. I bought this one on a sale. All right, now I'm going to add some straight white on it while it's still wet. This is important because we're going to create some texture here. So I rinsed off my flat brush and I'm dipping it in white. And I'm going to kind of brush it in. Again, I'm going to rinse it again because I don't want to keep mixing around the same paint, and put in a little more white and just kind of drag it in. We are depositing paint and we are letting it kind of do its own thing. Just to kind of create that gradient that cloth has. Especially like fancy silk, like we have to imagine this is. He's not wearing, you know, duck canvas. It's nice quality fabric. There we go. All right, I think I'm happy with that right now. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same with his sleeve. Except for when I do this part, the back side of the cuff, that would be the inside, I'm going to let it stay a little darker. And you know what? I think I'm going to do this with a detail brush just because this space is kind of small. So I'm going to treat these two parts of the cuff completely independently. Because I'm going to do different things in both spaces. The hook already kind of tells you that it's coming from the inside of this white cuff because it overlaps one part and not the other for perspective. But we definitely want to make sure that that remains obvious, that this is the inside of his coat. If you're wondering why I had you, paint over any correction areas white, it's because this part would still make sense to do. You wouldn't want any drawing lines to mess you up here. Okay, so now I'm going to add in some white. I'm not going to try to go as light as I did here because I'm going to do that on this side, but I definitely want to add some white in, and I want to keep the direction like it's coming out from the cuff. And continue it on the sides. And for the moment, we're going to call that spot done. Now we're going to do the other side. And I'm going to add a little more white to that gray I used, just so that it's just a touch lighter to start with, because I have less working room in this spot. And I'm going to start filling in the space. Who has seen the new Encanto movie? Is it any good? I have yet to watch it, but I heard good things and I'm kind of definitely curious about it. All right, and now I'm going to fix the direction of my paint and again do the going outward. And now I'm going to start adding in my white. Oop, and I had a whoopsie, but you know what? I think I'm just going to extend the collar or the cuff rather than make the correction. I think that's okay. Add more white. And again, we're just kind of layering the paint on. And I'm going to do a round of drying and then I'm going to go over it again. Right, and I'm going to get my smaller detail brush and go into the straight white. And I'm going to add some lines in the cuff. We're going to add that detail. Okay, and now we're going to do the same thing over here. We're going to add a few solid lines, kind of going down of the white. And I need to put some more white on my palette. I'm sure by now you're all thinking, well, yeah, well and sure, but what about his face? Well, I tend to do the face last because honestly, it gives me the most trepidation and I have to dry the whole canvas so that way I can let my arms rest on it. There. Okay. And we'll do a little bit of it over on this cuff too, just not as much. There. Now we're going to come back up to this. And we're going to take some of our straight red and do lines. And because that area is so big, I'm going to do it with my angle brush of the cadmium deep red hue. Being that this was part of the color that made it. Let the side of the brush do the work for you. We're just kind of inviting that color to come back into play here, being that it is part of the makeup that we use to make this color. Just giving it permission to shine a little and coordinate with the rest of his look. And again, make sure you're following the same directionality, that it's kind of radiating from his face. It has been ages since I've been into a theme park. I am going through massive theme park withdrawals. What is everyone's favorite ride? I personally absolutely love the Haunted Mansion and Pirates of the Caribbean. Those are my absolute favorites. And now I'm going to take some of the dioxazine purple, which was the other color we used to make this, and the color we used to make that purple, and do it a little bit raw in there too. Not a lot, just a little. Again, just kind of giving it permission to be seen, and we're not overdoing it here because this can be a little bit of an overwhelming color. We're letting the shape of the brush do the work for us. Make sure you follow the same lines that you did before, all kind of radiating from his face. Don't forget the top. There we go. And then we're going to do the top part of the hat. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and add a layer of my iridescent golds over the hook. Just because I want this part to be shiny. Oh, it's a little coming out a bit clumpy. There we go. I'll probably need more than that. There we go. That's probably better. And then over the yellow ochre we go. This should add a little layer of shine and provide that last bit of kind of coverage. You might wind up doing something more with this. I haven't really decided yet, being it is the first time I have painted hook. I won't know what I'm really going to want until I get to the end. And then realize it's not finished, because that's sometimes the way that art works. If you're not happy with how something is turning out, you may just need to take a step back. Maybe a couple of steps, think about, the way it hangs on your wall. You will not, when it's on your wall, you're not going to be literally right on top of it like I am right now. You'd be standing a few feet back. And sometimes the small things you notice when you're up close don't mean very much when you step back a little bit. There we go. Okay, so I've got my layer of golden. Ooh, yeah. Yeah, I like that. Although I see a line I need to clean up real quick. There we go. Okay. With that part done, we're now going to add some of the dot work to the coat, not to the background, just to this arm piece here and this sliver here. So I'm just going to grab the bottom real quick. And I'm going to use some of the red that we mixed for the hat. I think that's a good complementary color. And in the wrist part, I'm going to do my lines going off to the side. Because fabric goes around your wrist, not up your wrist. Or at least that's the way I envision it goes. And we're not being really intentional about this. We're just adding some lines for some texture. If you used all of this color up and you don't have any more, it's dioxazine, purple, and red. And we're going to do the same there. You know, again, we're not trying to cover it. We're just adding a little. All right. Now I'm going to dry it, and I'm going to draw on his face. Right. A good way to tell whether or not your paint is dry or wet, apart from the iridescent part on the hook, would be is when the light catches it, you see anything shiny. Standard acrylic paint will not have any shine to it. If it's shiny, it is wet. I do have a couple of raised spaces where I had a lot of, you know, a thick, heavy stroke in a couple of areas on the hat that are still a little wet, but, you know, the whole under area is dry to the touch. So I'm going to go ahead and draw in my face. I'm going to use my watercolor pencil so that if I make a mistake, I can, you know, cover it with water and then go back. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to think about his eyebrows first. I'm going to work from the top down just because I think that's easier for me. And, you know, you may make a couple of mistakes while you're working on it, but I'm thinking that his eyebrows are going to kind of come here. They're kind of close together, and then this one kind of hangs off. So I'm going to kind of indicate that impression there. Made my line a little long here, so I'm just going to take a little bit of water and snub it out. Just so I don't confuse myself later when I go to add the paint. The reason I'm using a red watercolor pencil is because when I go to wipe it off and it leaves a little residue, it'll still be kind of part of the flesh tone. All right, so I've kind of got the idea of where his eyebrows are. So I'm going to kind of do the shape of his eye next. I'm going to kind of do a round shape. It kind of caves in. And this eye is a little squinted, so I'm going to kind of do it that way. And this one, the eyes are kind of close together. And it kind of comes, his eyelid is a little more pronounced in this one, so he's got his eyelid that's visible in addition to his eye. So I'm going to do the eye. It comes all the way up kind of up to there. And I'm thinking that the eyebrow was kind of like that. Okay, and under this eye, we've got kind of a bag. I'm sure a lot of us fully understand what that feels like. So we're going to put it in there like that. Now he's got a ginormous snoge that starts at the corner of his eye, like absolutely huge. That is a big nose. It looks like a baseball. So we're going to come off the corner of the eye and go all the way kind of down to almost where the hook is. I don't think I got it quite round enough. I truly cannot say enough good things about watercolor pencil. Okay, so that's kind of the base of that part of the schnoz. Now we're gonna go kind of close and up like this, almost up to where it starts. So we kind of got the shape in there of that. And then kind of off to the side of his nose, we've got the cheek line for his smirk. And it kind of goes to about here. And his sneer kind of goes here and goes into his hook. And I guess I shouldn't forget his mustache. Let's go ahead and put that in. Maybe I did his nose just a little too big. I'm going to fix that because I don't have anywhere for his mustache to go. So I'm going to bring up his nose a tiny bit. Let me change the shape of this just a little. There. That way it's still kind of that round shape. All right, and now we've got a space for the mustache. And we know it kind of goes up against the hook and off the cheek. And this one does the same. Up under the nose and straight up into the hat. So we've kind of got most of the face in. Now we're going to finish drawing in the mouth. And the base of the rest of the bottom part of his mouth is sort of a scoop. Kind of stops kind of there. And there's a bit for his teeth, and it's sort of just like a round line. And then there's kind of the suggestion of a tongue. And then this kind of snarly lip portion. So we've got the shape in. And I think I'm going to have to drag some of his face over. I don't think I gave myself quite enough space on his face, so I'm going to fix that real quick first. I still have a little bit of my face mix, and I still have that weird black line from earlier that I need to fix. So this is perfect timing. I'm just going to go over it and extend the face a little bit. Now that my face is in, I can see that I needed to add a little more jawline. And I'll go back over that spot again with this paint just because covering black is a little harder. Now I'm going to take my tiniest detail brush in the Mars Black, and I'm going to start putting in my eyebrows, my bushy eyebrows. Feel bad for him that he doesn't realize how bad this looks. Somebody help him. I'm putting in the shape here first, and then I'm going to make it nice and thick. And that part's kind of rounded. And this part kind of actually, like, add a little water to my brush so that it's nice and fluid. Kind of flicks up a little bit. And then comes back down. There we go. Then I'm going back with my detail brush, and I'm kind of just barely using like the littlest wisp of the end to add a little bit of texture for what might be hair, just because they'd be a little wispy, especially if they'd be as big and bushy as this is. They would not be a uniform clean line. And now we'll do the other one. And this one kind of slopes up off over the eye. Oop, I need to add a little water to my brush so that my line goes a little more smooth. Again, it's kind of bushy, and it comes up off the corner of his eye. So I'm going to let my eyebrow be thick enough that it goes off. And it kind of forks a little here, so we're going to let it do that, and the suggestion of it kind of going down. All right, so we've got his eyebrow in. Now we're going to go ahead and fill in the whites of the eye first. You might have to do 2 coats of this just because covering up anything in white usually does. And again, over on this side for where this part is. Right, you're going to take your black and you're going to outline across the top of the eye. You definitely want to make sure your brush is a little bit wet, not very wet, just a little, so you've got a nice clean line. And for this, the black line kind of extends up past the eye at the top. So we're just going to let it. And same for the under eye, extends out a little. Now we're going to go ahead and do this again on the other side, but we're not going to do where the lid is, just the eye, because the lid is sort of kind of a warm gray. So what we'll do when we do that is we'll use the gray left over from the shirt and add a little bit of the yellow ochre to it. No, not yellow ochre. I think we'll add a little bit of maybe a little bit of the purple we used for the hat. No, we're not there yet. I'll decide in a minute. I'm not sure how I'm going to accomplish that just yet. This is more of a figure it out as you go. Oop, I'm going to add a little water to my brush. My line is not as smooth as I want it to be. want to say it kind of looks like a skin color purple. So kind of like what happens when you don't get enough sleep. So I'm going to take the skin color and put a little bit of it into another spot on my palette. Just a little. And I'm going to add a little bit of the light purple, I think, to it and see if I can't come up with... Oh, yeah, that's exactly it. All right, so you're going to take your skin tone and add a little bit of the light purple. And we're going to create the bags under his eyes and his eyelids. So it's going to extend up. We're going to fill that in. God, I would not want to put concealer on this. That is a hella crazy bag. Right? Looks like he's been punched out almost. And he's got a little bit of it on this side too, kind of up from under his nose. I didn't draw it in because it was so small, but we'll put it in now. And on his eyelid as well. And I'm going to go back in with the black because I see I needed to let it hang off a little bit and I didn't see that. So I'm going to do that real quick. And we're going to go ahead and do another little quick layer of white on the inside. I know it's a little unnerving to watch it be so white, but we'll get there. We'll add pupils, I promise. We're just not going to do it right now. Okay, so now we're going to take a little bit of burnt sienna. And we're going to put a little bit of our flesh color that we made in it, just so that we create something that's just a little darker than his flesh. So that way we can outline his nose and his mouth. Should be kind of like a reddish brown kind of look to it. All right, so now we're going to do this part. And we're going to let it go all the way up from over the eye. We're just going to cover exactly where we drew. Is it starting to look good now? You looking like Captain Hook? Good. I'm glad. Because otherwise I don't know what I would have done with this if it didn't look like Captain Hook. And this part actually extends a tiny bit, so we'll let it. Okay, we're actually going to go ahead and line the side of his face with this color too a little bit. just because when you're looking at someone's face, there would be more of a shadow of color. So we're just going to try and create a little bit of illusion of that. And this party actually has a little bit of a divot there, so we'll add that in. You can use this as an opportunity to clean up any lines. Layer here where I extended his jaw a little bit when I was putting in his face. I'm going to allow some of this extra color to come up and around. All right, now I'm going to put the white in for his teeth. And just like with the eye, we'll probably have to do another layer of this. And we're going to use a little bit of the cadmium red that we used for his coat to do the outline of his tongue. I'm going to go ahead and fill it in. How's it going out there? If you're getting frustrated, take a minute and take a step back. All right, I'm going to add a little bit of white, just literally a dot, just to lighten up just a fraction, literally just enough to create the idea of a little bit of texture, nothing too major. And now we're going to put in his mustache. You'll want your brush to have a little bit of water on it so that the line is nice and clean, since you'll need it to extend all the way up into his hat. There we go. I'm getting there. We're getting there, ladies, gents. I have a feeling our stream's gonna run on probably another hour, because we're still kind of just putting the basic shape in. I didn't put as much space there as I should have, so when I'm probably going to dry it and touch that up to give it more of a gap. And for this one, it's got kind of a bit that extends a little further, like that, before it goes up. There we go. Again, it's going to go and kiss right up against that hook. And it's going to go a fair amount of the way up. There we go. And it actually comes at an angle like that. So we'll do that real quick. And I'm going to dry it so that way I can correct the mustache. Okay, so we're going to take a little bit of our flesh color and we're going to carve out a little spot. We're also going to use it because my flesh color had kind of changed a little bit. We're going to bring it in and use it in a couple other places on the face to help it make sense there. He's an old man, so he's got a kind of a weathered face, so this makes sense. It wasn't intentional, but sometimes it happens that way with art. It's what I would have probably wound up doing anyway. Just to kind of add some variation. So I'm going to take a little water and smooth it out a little. And add a little white into my flesh color that's left. And we're just kind of going to lazy stroke in parts of his face. We're going to highlight. I bet you never dreamed your makeup skills would come in handy on the canvas. Well, let me tell you, they do, especially if you're painting a face. My mouth line's got a little touched on, so I'm going to cover that real quick. There. Right, now the inside of his mouth is kind of a dark color, sort of almost the color of his hat, so I'm just going to use his hat color there. Again, if you don't have any more, it is a red and the dioxazine purple. And I would use whatever your smallest brush is, because it's not a lot of working space. There. Okay. The inside of his mouth is done for the most part. You know, we still have to do some more work on his teeth though. We need to whiten it up a little bit because for whatever reason he's got good oral hygiene out in Neverland. I guess that's the boringness of being an adult, is the reminder of having good oral hygiene. And again, I'm going to go over and do another layer of the white on his eyes, just so that way it's a really good crisp white. We don't want fleshy colored eyes. Or if we did, we didn't want for this. Okay, now we're finally going to add the pupil, although I'm going to touch up this line here. Give it a little bit of another rich little layer. There. All right, so the pupil is, he's looking down. So his pupil is going to be here. And his pupil is pretty tiny. And this one, because he's looking over in this direction, will be more over here. Yeah, see, he's looking down at his hook. Okay, I'm pretty happy with how that's playing out so far. I am gonna do another quick run spot over here because I think this needs to be darker, more accented. There, much happier with it. All right, so we have the base of our hook in. If you didn't want to do a dot style, you could, get to this point and you would call yourself done. You could do that. I urge you not to. I urge you to have a little bit of fun. We are now going to add in all of the interest, all of the additional interest. I'm going to take my dotting tool. They call it for like modeling clay. You can see I use mine. Mine is well loved. And I'm going to go with my dove gray that I did on his hair. And I'm going to go ahead and add some more of that in. Turn this around a tiny bit. There we go. And I'm just going to take dots and follow along in the texture I had before. Not a lot, and I'm not covering up anything that I did before. I'm just adding a little more texture. Just want the suggestion of, something more going on. And when the entire area is covered, it has a tendency to be really gorgeous. Maybe a touch overwhelming when you're first looking at it. Mostly because you're just trying to figure out where to look first. But you want to keep your dots going in the same kind of direction and flow as the lines you did. You're going to try not to have any uniformity anywhere. You want to break any of that up that you find yourself doing, because you want it to be non-uniform. All right, and now we're going to keep going on around in his curls. If you were ever wanting to do a portrait of like your hair catching snow, this would be a cute way to do that. Just kind of thinking out loud about, you know, other applications for this. We're just going to keep going around. Is everybody having fun? Hope so. Hope this isn't too complicated. I feel like the hardest part is drawing in the face. Like that's always the hardest part for me. But a lot of that is thinking about, you know, where parts of the face are in relations to other part of your painting. You know, don't forget the sides. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you should still continue it. Excellent. Yeah. All right, so we got one side done. Now we're going to go over and do the other side. It's nice to be able to just kind of zone out while you paint and just let your mind kind of drift. It's very relaxing, especially when you're doing like this dotting technique, because it doesn't really require a whole lot of thought from you. Or at least it shouldn't. You should not be overthinking the placement of these dots. Okay, and his hair is done. Well, maybe I'll go back and add some straight black in there too. We'll see. I'm not sure. But for the moment, I'm thinking we're done. Okay. Now we're going to also take this gray and we're going to introduce a little bit of it back into here. And you're just kind of going to follow down the scarf. You don't want to overdo it. We're just kind of telling the story of the way that this scarf is hanging down the front. My favorite part that he does in the movie is sort of that bit in the Pirates Cove, Skull Cove, Skull Rock. There we go. I think it's been a little while. Correct me in chat if you remember the exact name, where they first he has his first rerun again with the alligator. It makes me think of that part in the Old Wishes fireworks show. Never smile at a crocodile. No, you can't get friendly with a crocodile. You know, you would never want to do that to start with. We know from in Florida for alligators that you never want to get friendly with anything like that. Oh, it occurs to me, I need to draw in the line for his teeth. I'm going to use the same gray for that. And it's just kind of a 1, 2, 3 lines. That one's a little thicker than I intended, so I'm going to touch that up real fast. There. I just happened to think about it since it was right there. And now we're going to do over here. And over here, I'm going to do my dots a little more clustered in the back. and do them a little further apart in the front, just so that way it maintains the idea that this is the dark side. But we still want some of that richness on this part of the cuff too. Not a lot, just a little. There we go. Excellent. Okay. Take a deep breath if you need one. Okay. So now I'm going to add more of my dots to the coat. Now I'm going to take some straight dioxazine purple because it will look almost black in this case. And I'm going to do a couple of dots of that. Not all the way across, just kind of, again, kind of creating the idea that it's darker on the left side than on the right to allow some differentiation from the red in the background. And we'll go ahead and we'll put it over here too. Don't go crazy with it, just a little. Okay. With that done, because it is easier at this point to turn it upside down because we've got a lot of wet paint, we're going to turn it upside down. And one, I'm going to go ahead and at this point do the bottom of my painting since I didn't do it earlier. I'm gonna add in the black first, just because that's the easiest color to get to at the moment on my palette. I'm gonna rinse off my brush. Add in a little bit of my gray on the bottom. And a little bit of my white. And now some of the red. Everyone holding up out there? Good. The last time I went to Disney was just before they shut down. Hadn't been for all of that January in 2020 and all of that February, but I did go that first weekend in March. I didn't go for long. I just went long enough to say hi and bye. I didn't ride anything. I took a picture long distance with Minnie Mouse. Pardon me, I need to let my dog out. He's crying. My Puggle is such a drama queen. All right, now that I've got it turned upside down, I'm going to go ahead and add my little purple dots on the underside, so that way it kind of is continuous with what I've been doing. There. And a little bit of the gray dots in the hair over here on the underside. There we go. Like, I'm so hungry for a theme park right now that I would take SeaWorld and be absolutely ecstatic. Not that SeaWorld's not a good park, because it is a great park, but Universal and Disney, it is not. Okay, so I've got the dot work up there done. So now I'm gonna kind of focus on his hat here. I'm actually gonna take a little bit of black and I'm gonna dot around the edges. Nothing too insane, just kind of defining where the different parts of the hat are a little more. And when the other bottom dries, we'll flip it over and we'll do the correction on the dots for this part after. And then over here and over here. Excellent. And continuing off the side of the canvas. Awesome. Okay, now we're gonna go and dip into the purple. Our dioxazine purple. And we're gonna go around the inside again. Just kind of framing along where we already had done the black. And now we're gonna go over it with red. We're gonna dot in red. And this is not as like strategic, you're just kind of putting it in. This is just kind of, again, just a suggestion of texture. Oop, it kind of covered his mustache a tiny bit. You don't want to do that, so make sure if you have a whoopsie that you either can wipe it off right away if it's not wet underneath that paint, or wait till it dries and paint over it, whichever. I urge you to not overthink this part. You are just laying down random bits of dots and color. You're just kind of creating the suggestion of it there. The goal is pretty much to use any of the paint that you've already laid out. And it's okay to use colors from other parts of your painting in other parts of your painting. For example, we'll probably use a little bit of the light purple maybe in the hat too, if you happen to have that on your brush. Or you could even mix it in with the hair a little bit. You don't really want to waste anything, is the point. You want to use it all. If you've got it on your palette, you want to find a way to use it. Otherwise, you're just kind of washing it down the drain. And this is, you know, non-toxic paint, but you still shouldn't be tossing stuff down the drain if you don't have to be. Okay, and while that's kind of drying, we're gonna go over into our feather and go back to the dioxazine purple. And we did the little dots, the little dashes before, but now we're gonna add in our little dots. We're going to follow along the stem. Let me readjust my easel. I got out of frame for you guys. I'm sorry. It's just a little far away for me to work. And now we're going to follow out the stems a little bit. Tell the story of the feather. If you find that your dotting tool is creating large lumpy dots, then it means you need to rinse to dry it off a little bit and then dip back into the paint. You don't want to get over excessive, otherwise your dots won't become nice and even. And again, I think I got this dotting tool set on Amazon for like $6, but you could use the back end of your paintbrush to do this. You don't have to use a special tool. It was just easier for me. And now I'm going to kind of do a couple and just kind of loosey-goosey. Hang on. Don't forget the sides. Right, and now I think I'm going to go over and do a little bit of the light purple. Just in a couple of places where it would be noticeable. Anywhere where you had like a particularly dark space from one of your dashes, you can add a little bit of this there. Not that we're eliminating our dashes, we're just kind of giving them purpose. All right, and I think our feather is good and well done. But I still have a little bit of this purple left. And I think I kind of maybe want to use it in the hat. So I will. I'm going to make sure that all my dots are pretty small, but we're going to work it in. He's a coordinating captain. And who doesn't love purple? Let's go ahead and work it into a little bit around the rest of the hat too. Nothing too major, just a little here and there. And again, you don't have to do this. I'm just choosing to because I think that it will just add a little something extra. And I'm all about adding a little something extra. And don't forget to do the sides. We're telling the story of this hat. We're letting it be really in the moment. We're letting Captain Hook have a little flair. Again, don't think too hard about placement. All right, and I think that's good for there. And I'm gonna go ahead and attack it with the hair dryer. I'm going to turn it upside down now and get a little bit of my dot work up here. Adding in my purple and adding in my red. Okay. All right, so I feel like I need to do more with this mustache. So I'm going to add some gray there. I don't have a gray that I want to use because I don't want to use the lightest shade that I used on his hair. So I'm going to mix a little more gray for a slightly deeper shade. Just a little though, since we're just trying to tell about the texture of his mustache. I don't want it to disappear up here. So we're going to go ahead and dot that too. And we're just about done. You know, and I think the same needs to be done with his eyebrows. His eyebrows need a little more too. So we're just going to add a little, just a little dotting there too. Yeah, I like that. It occurs to me that with that dark brown, I needed to extend out the little bit of his under eye. So I'm going to do that real quick. Because his under eye is supposed to be outlined it kind of goes off from the side too. Touch up a tiny piece of the mouth. Okay, let's see what looks unfinished apart from the actual red background. I think I want to put some white dots in his hook. But not on the whole thing, just kind of where the light would be hitting it. It's like an accent. So maybe just like across the top here. Oh, I'm out of white. I have a little more white. Just a little, since we're almost done. That's right, we are almost finished. This one didn't take me nearly as long as I thought it would. And we're going to just do this side of the hook. Since that's the side that kind of has light on it. You know what, while I've got a little bit of this white out, let's go ahead and add a few white dots here too. It can't hurt. Just since it's already on my palette. For just that tiny bit touch more texture. And technically, I guess that part is part of his coat too. So let me go ahead and do something with that. I think that's good. All right, now for our background. I am thinking I want to introduce more of this gold color. So I think what I'm going to do is little like swirls of gold. I have to get more gold out than this. There we go. Too much water. We're kind of just going to go in like a little corkscrew here. And we're going to fill that spot in just like it's completely a corkscrew. Continuing on the side as well. And at some point your circle will kind of extend over here. And we're just going to keep going around until that spot is full. Don't forget that you need to do the sides as well. And this part would also be kind of part of our background, so it needs to be dotted too. Same with this little sliver here. And then we're going to do, I'm going to turn it upside down so I don't stick my hand in the middle of all of that. To do over here, although I am going to let it like sit on the edge of the easel so I can get better access. And we're going to make it its own little corkscrew. We're going to say this is a different one. What do you think, chat? Should I do dots across the face? I've done it on some of them, but I don't do it for all of them. It just kind of depends on what it looks or feels like. And maybe when I get done with this part, I'll take a step back and see how I feel about it. All right, and now I'm going to turn it to the side. So I get the side without touching anything. Ooh, need some more paint. I try to put paint out sparingly so I don't use and put out any that I don't need. Because otherwise I got to find a way to use it in the painting. The idea is to run out. Normally by this point, I probably would have taken like 10, oop, 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 we got way too much there. So we're gonna, because I know the red is dry, I'm just gonna smear that off real quick. There we go. Drop my tool. There was just a little too much gold on there and it decided to run away from me. There. Guess my paint is a little thick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a dry brush and I'm going to scoop it up. There. It happens. Mistakes happen. Sometimes paint gets a little thick. It's okay. Just cover the dot and move on. Almost there. I have a tendency when I'm this concentrated to sometimes hold my breath. All right, now I'm going to take a little brush and fix up where that gold got a little away from me. Just I don't want it to shine so much in that one spot. There. What do you think? Does he look finished, or do I need to dot his face? Maybe just lines? Maybe lines would be enough. Because it doesn't feel finished. Although I do need to finish putting a little bit of something of the gold on the side. Okay. I think that we will go ahead and put at least a little bit of dot work. We'll do a little bit. Well, maybe not dot work. We'll do tiny lines. We will use our tiniest brush. And we will do a few small lines. I'll experiment with it and see how I feel. Maybe watered down lines I like. Just so that it looks like it belongs. So what I'm doing is I am putting a little bit of water on my brush and dipping it into white and kind of allowing it to sort of fade into the background, but I'm adding a little bit of that line texture so that it matches with the dots that I've got going on. We want it to make sense. Be consistent with our theming. And you know, when you do his nose, you want the lines to kind of go in a circle. And I kind of like this little bit being darker. It's sort of like he's got a 5 o'clock shadow. Because he's old. He has to shave. He's not like Peter Pan, where he doesn't have to worry about facial hair. Maybe once I get a few more of these lines in, maybe I'll feel like adding some dots over it. We'll see. I'm not there yet. We're still just kind of theming his face, I guess you could say. I got a little carried away over here. Let's add a little bit of flesh tone back. Oop, now the puggle is trying to come in. Hold on. Come in, Mr. Dude. All right, you too. Now I've got both my doggies in here with me. All right, I'm gonna add a little up here. over here. Oop, we don't want it so thick. Oop. Right, I think we're almost about done. Oop, well, that was a little too much. Let's go back. Yeah, okay. You know what? I think he needs, maybe I need to use some of the dots of this face texture in some of those small places is what needs to happen. Even though it's... Dude, what have you got? My dog will eat paintbrushes. Actually, my dog will eat anything. It's sort of a problem. And I'm not going to add these little dots like everywhere, but I am going to put like the idea of them in a lot of places just so that it's kind of there. And it also kind of, you know, again, he's got a beard, or would have a beard if he didn't shave. And this kind of gives him like pores and whatnot for, you know, those to exist. And being very careful not to put my hand down on anything because everywhere on my canvas is pretty much currently wet. Using up the last of like this flesh color. Just because I hate waste. I cannot bear the idea of like tossing paint, even a little bit. I'm going to turn this upside down just because I'm struggling to find a place to stick my hand. There we go. Excellent. We are approaching the end, guys. We are almost there. I've climbed the mountain and across the river and I'm almost there. I'm almost there. Please don't let me sing again. I am not good at it. I will embarrass the crap out of myself. Actually, no, I don't really feel shame, but you would not enjoy it. I'm almost out of this flesh color. Just gotta have enough to kind of finish over here. I think I am going to put just a couple of small white dots in a couple of places. Uh-oh. We had a little bit of water. It's important not to let that happen. Otherwise it will pick up your paint and run with it. I decided I would add a couple of white dots to the parts that are a little darker on the face. Just because the flesh dots didn't show at all. We're just gonna, you know, this little bit of smidgen that I have left on my palette, I'm gonna use here. I think we're like 5 minutes out and we're done. I think I'm almost ready to sign it. And I've officially almost run out of white. All right, we are done. We are game and match. All I gotta do is sign my name, and the only color that I have left is a little bit of black, so that's what I'm gonna use for my initials. Initials are a bit of a hot mess. We're gonna fix this real quick, because that would bother me. There we go. We are done. I hope you had a good time painting with me. Scoot it back. Have a wonderful evening. Happy Sunday, and I hope all the good things continue on into the week. Make sure you join Patreon if you would like to be able to have a traceable for when I do Gaston next week. Gaston is next Sunday. Tune in Sunday at 2 o'clock to watch me paint Gaston. See you all. Bye.